One thing adventure bikes have in common is that they really have a lot of accessories. It includes heated grips, USB chargers, 12-volt adapters. So there comes a time when you get so many on the bike that you have to start thinking, where am I going to get voltage for this? Well, there's a really good way to do it, and that's a 12-volt distribution system, and let's put one of those together today. All right, so let me summarize this really quick, and maybe this is all you'll need to be able to put this together for yourself. But the idea here is to create a single 12-volt DC distribution for the motorcycle using this little fuse box slash distribution block. And the way this works is you have a positive and a negative terminal that you're going to be able to connect your battery leads to. In this case, we're going to do it a little different. We're going to run leads off a relay, and then that provides 12-volt DC to each one of these little fused terminals. The way we get the relay set up is we're going to tap into the lamp supply, so the supply voltage that comes from the bike's harness, and that comes from a fuse actually that's really close to that supply, and that'll give us an ignition switched 12-volt supply to be able to actuate the relay that controls this. From there, we're able to take off accessories and supply them with 12 volts DC from any one of these 6 distribution locations, and our return path to ground is right here. So that's basically it. We have to do some work as far as the switch goes for this. Normally this harness that I use, and I use a crazy harness here, it's a bit of a spaghetti monster right now, but I buy a harness for this, already done up. I don't make my own harness. So the harness comes from, for me, Princess Auto, but I think like Canadian Tire and Harbor Freight have their own equivalent. Either way, that'll be included in a parts list. That might be all you need to get the creative juices flowing in your own mind and be able to set up your own system. By all means, this is just my system for my KLR 650. I got a 2018 Gen 2, and it's basically what I landed on. There are smaller versions of this with less distributions that you might be able to find that's a little bit easier to mount inside the bike. If you do, by all means, go for it. If you're looking for what I'm going to use today, I have a complete parts list in the description. In addition to that, I have a schematic diagram and a wiring diagram, and I'll throw those up here right now. All right, first things first. Whenever you're doing electrical work on anything really, despite it being a KLR or a motorcycle or whatever, you got to disconnect your power supply. So we got to disconnect our battery here real quick. When you're disconnecting this fella, you take the black off first. Also, I've got the bike all torn down, and if you need some instruction on how to get it to where it is right now, then by all means check out the link above, and that'll give you a little video on how to more or less field strip the KLR 650. So I'm just going to set that aside. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to run our cable. We want to run our harness. So again, like I mentioned, this is a 2 light LED harness. So I only need one of the wire runs for that. But before I get into like cutting cable, sizing cable, and putting in things that are going to get power from this cable, I want to run it all first because I want to know how far my wire runs are going to be. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with the relay. I've already found a position for the relay right here, and that's next to my relay that I use for my auxiliary headlights. So again, I'm not putting anything, I'm not zip tying anything down right now. I'm just kind of like soft fitting it. All right, so with that shoved up in there, let's just kind of move things around a bit. Another really good tip for running harness wire like this is to move the parts that move to their maximum deflections like that. What this is, and like observe the cable as you do it. See, so if you look here at the maximum deflection, I have a potential pinch point like right here, but it's actually fairly decent. So I'm gonna be all right. All right, so we have our inline fuse and we're gonna check to make sure there's a fuse in there. This is really cool, check this out. Here's my other harness. It's from a different supplier. Same kind of idea, but almost like they, they intended for that to work like that. if I come straight through. All right, so that is our main power supply to the relay. Next, we're going to do up the switch wiring. So the switch is right here. This would connect into this regular switch here. So you can see how these would like just connect. And if you want to use the switch that comes with this, that's totally acceptable. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing that, really. It's a good switch. It'll last for quite a while. I had one previously, it did get gummed up and I ended up switching it out. Like my auxiliary headlights were this kind, but then I switched it. But mine I'm going to put in this area here. So you can just kind of leave it like that if you want. There's some stickiness on the back. You could either zip tie it up down here too if you wanted. And then you can just kind of push it on and off. I'm going to use a different switch though. So I want to be different. I'm going to use a rocker switch right here with an LED indicator. And we're going to go through there somewhere. Let's get this wired up. This is going to go into the same spot, sort of. So I have 3 wires associated to this switch circuit. So this is part of the control circuit element of this. And basically the way this works out is I have this red wire, which doesn't have an end to it. And that's what I'm going to tap in to get a supply. That's going to be my ignition switch supply, basically. I have this white wire that runs in from the coil to the relay. So basically it's going to go in from this red. It'll go to one pole of the switch, and then the white comes back from the other pole. So when you push the switch in, that'll energize the coil will energize, and then allow the contacts that are set up for the battery main power supply to close, and it'll allow the distribution system to have main power. And then of course there's a ground right here, and this ground I'm just going to pull back that way. So let's run this up first. Pull it all through. So this is what we're going to tap into for our ignition switch supply. And there we are. So now we have a ton of extra space, which is really nice. The good part about this harness is that it has a lot of wire space here. So if I wanted to, I could go all the way back to the actual tail light, or I could go to the light here for the license plate and splice in there, but I'm not. I'm actually going to go in right here in this section. All right, so the harness is all run. Everything from what I planned out seems to be good as far as cable relief and access. There's no issues, no tight cables that are going to end up getting pulled around or get cinched up. So the next thing we want to get at is we want to consider our mechanical placement. We want to think about how everything is going to fit as far as the accessories that we want to use, the 12-volt distribution itself, and any holes that we got to drill in the switch. So let's take a look at all that next. So fitting things into a Japanese motorcycle is not really that easy, because there isn't a lot of space to work with. So we have to kind of work with what we got, basically. Realistically speaking, this is a big package to put in such a small motorcycle envelope, really. Plus, in addition to this, you want to be able to move this around. You don't want to have this permanently fixed in a position too much, because if you do, it makes it harder and harder to get new accessories into these little positions here. And also you want to be smart about how you put it in too. Like for example, I've chosen right underneath the headlights, there's a nice little pocket right here that I can tuck into. And I think that's going to work well for me. The next part that I want to do is I want to put my actual accessories in. So I'm going to put in today, I've got like a cigarette adapter, and that's going to go right there. And I've been using the Chrono Parts Rally Dash system. You can see I already got some things used up on there. And then I have a USB charger port that I'm going to put over here. Kudos for how easy that is. All right, so those went in actually really well. That was not a lot of grinding, realistically. I might loop this around so it's right side up, but that's an easy thing to do. So we got that one, and we got that one there now. So the next thing we got to do is we got to fit the distribution system into this location here. So in order to do that, number one, I'm going to clean the mud out of there. But two, I'm going to put some padding in on each side here so that I can slide it under. So that stuff there is just called RV foam. It's basically like weatherproof foam that has a sticky side to it. And it's really good for just like creating nice places that you could snug things into. There. So that is not going anywhere now, and it's nice and snugged in. Cool. All right. I think we have this mounted now. So now we can get on to preparing the switch on the instrument cluster. So the instrument cluster is right here, and you can see we have these dimple points here. These are usually guides for like drilling out holes so that you can put stuff on here for accessory like control switches. However, there's only one of these out of the three that are usable. If you look behind, you can see that the mounting bar right here is just interfering with the top and the furthest one in there. And it's no better on this side either. So really the only one you have access to is the far side one to the lower end, which is going to be that. And this is the sketchiest part of this because now I have to drill into the bike. I hate drilling into the bike. So hopefully this is going to be a home run. Pretty sure it will be. It'll be fine. All right, that's a little bit more than I need, but it's going to work. And if we look to the back, we can see we don't have any interference for our lines. The closest thing that we got is that mounting bar, but it's quite a ways away. So I think we're good. I think that's going to work very well. All right, so the mechanical things are where they should be. We got our switch in, we have the distribution into the cowl, and I've got the two accessories that I want to add as demonstration, I guess, for this in place on the rally dash. The next part is to do the electrical business with the wiring. So I like doing the worst first. So I'm going to do my tap in on the headlight line first. And there are a couple ways to do this. I mean, you can do a solder tap, which is what I like to do. So I'm going to get a soldering iron in there and I'm going to put the tap wire in and I'm going to solder it in. Or you can do a T-tap, and that's totally fine. T-taps are like little plastic things that you can lay the line across into, put a second line in, and then you crush them all together so that they become electrically common at that point. That's a really easy way to do it. I'm not a big fan of it because they aren't as robust as like a solder connection, but they'll do the job. So if you're not comfortable soldering, that's totally fine. Just grab some T-taps and do it. And if you want to know how both of these processes are done in detail, I'm not going to really go into it here, but there's a video up top that has a section of it that goes into real good detail about how to use the T-tap and how to do a solder splice. So whatever you're comfortable with, do that. And definitely be comfortable doing this because mistakes at this part of the game will actually be kind of annoying to try to fix. So if you want to take a break, if you want to take it easy, just be comfortable, be relaxed, use the method that suits you best. And yeah, absolutely. So where we're going to get our supply from is right here. So right after here, you can see this 15 amp lamp. That's the fuse that represents the supply to the headlights, the tail light, and the light that's for the license plate. So at this point here, all three of those items are electrically in common on that 12 volt line. So I'm just going to come in here and sneak a little bit of that out. But what I'll be doing is I'll be looking for, underneath all of this shrink wrap here, is looking for a red wire. And I found that out using the Climber manual wiring diagram. So if you look, you can see this is the headlight fuse that we were looking at, that 15 amp. And you can see that red line, red wire, is going to be in common to these 3 points. All right, let's prep for surgery here. So the first thing I got to do is I got to get this this shrink wrap off so I can expose the wires. There's about, I think, 3 or 4 wires in there. So we're just going to take that very carefully. So we're looking for a red wire. Of course, you most definitely want to have the battery disconnected, right? Get that sucker disconnected. Don't work into any wires that are live for obvious reasons. So we're going to wrap that copper around the other copper. See that? Bingo. Oh yeah, that's good and shiny. So I got my other lead in the other area, so I'm just going to go on this side of the splice. There we go. We're good. There, that looks good. It tests good, and the solder looks good. So that's really that's like one of the hardest parts of this whole operation. All right, so with most of the hard work out of the way, we can move into doing the hookup. So this is prepping wires, getting adapters on there, getting connectors on there, and getting them connected up to the location. So we'll start with the actual power distribution hookup. So I'm going to steal about this much cabling because I want to think about, how much I want to reach out. So when I'm thinking about pulling the cowl away from the bike and then having enough room to disconnect, I'm going to think about having about 16, 18 inches here away. So I will start that by just clipping that off. What do we got here? Gone. There we go. So now we have two connector wires all set and ready to go for the distribution. So let's hook those up. Bring the big boy up here. This tucks underneath. The whole operation just kind of slides in. All right, let's put that to the side for now and let's get to work on the switch. So the switch here, I've got 3 lines I need to have tapped into it. So I need basically to take off from right here and put these 3 in. And I have a note somewhere which one is which, because where this has an LED on it here, each one of these little pegs has to be a certain one. So you have to have a supply, a load, and a ground line. So essentially, the switch we have, for this particular switch, and it's written on it, actually in a little diagram, but we have earth or ground, this is load, and the bottom is supply. So black, white, red. There we go. Looks pretty good, eh? All insulated there. And there's still like cable relief to move things around. So that's good. All right, so now we're gonna do our blade connectors for the main power line right here. Connectors are key when you start putting stuff in because you wanna be able to take it out. Always think ahead when you're doing this kind of stuff in the planning phase of whatever project you're doing, because you gotta imagine, if something goes wrong or if you want to troubleshoot it, how easy is it going to be to take it out, right? you want to be relatively, you don't want to be like sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is wrong, I don't want to tear it apart. And then that just leads to your bike sitting up all the time. But if you make it easy to diagnose, if you make it easy to undo the things that you do, things like connectors, if you leave a lot of slack, then it's not such a daunting task to start going into the troubleshooting phase. There's usually a troubleshooting phase, folks. There we go, not too bad. That'll do it, I think. All right, so now that we have all the hookup, well, pretty much all the hookup done, the next step is going to be doing the hookup for the two accessories that I have. So this is the USB charger and the 12-volt adapter. And I've got a couple, I got some line here for that. So I'm just going to spin the cowl around and we'll take care of getting those hooked up there. And then we'll install them on the new distribution block. So these lines don't actually have a fuse in line with them anymore. And the reason for that is basically our fuses are now located at the distribution block. So if any overcurrent fault happens, the fuse that will go will be the one at the block. So we don't need one in line anymore. All right, so we'll pull this guy out. There we go. A little bit of a squid here, but that's all right. Tuck that feller back in. All right, now we are getting closer to being done here. So we want to start wrapping up some of the final connection points in the hookup. So what we're going to do is we're going to get these two ground points grounded up here. And like I mentioned, this is the ground that I used for my other auxiliary headlight circuit. You can also see that there's some other grounds from the vehicle harness, or from the harness itself, that are grounded there as well. So these are really good points. These have good continuity back. So just to make sure the bonding is good here. So whenever you want good grounding, you want good bonding. So that's why I removed a little bit of the paint off this frame here so I could get good metal on metal contact. And that's why I kind of sandwiched everything together. So what I'm going to do to test good bonding is I'm going to put my multimeter here. I'm going to set it up on a continuity check, so like that. And I'm going to check right at these points right here, one probe, and I'm going to go back to the negative terminal of the battery cable here. So this should go back to the battery. No problem, right? We'll check each one. There we go. All right, so we've got everything all wired up, all hooked up. I'm leaving the cowl on here pretty loosely. I just have the headlight circuit hooked up. So I got the high beam and the low beam hooked up. Really, that's all I'm gonna do because that's the circuit that I'm running off of to energize the coil. And yeah, so again, I got it all pretty loose here because, you know, I just want to check to make sure everything works. I always expect for things not to work, so that's a good start. So the headlights are on, so we don't have anything interfering there. Let's check the high beam. Yeah, high beam's good. Let's check the auxiliary lights are good. Now, the moment of truth. Master power on. Hey, look at that. It works. Hey, we're charging. Oh, that's a good charge too. 19 minutes till full. Let's see how much power this thing's pushing. Let's check the other outlet. All right, so, oh man, I'm so glad this worked out. The next step is to tidy all this cabling and to get everything secured into place. Great. Last step. Oh man, I'm so pumped that worked. All right, so we're all put back together now. It's looking really good. It took some time. And and went over the wiring and really cleaned things up a bit. Did a little bit of wire routing and stuff like that. And I reassembled the whole cowl and the front dash piece here with both of the accessories, the USB charger and the 12-volt adapter there. They're all looking really good. I did another test too after I did all the wire routing and all the cleanup. It's a really good idea to, once you get everything buttoned up and cleaned up, don't just leave it and pat yourself on the back too quickly. Run through and power it up and do another test, because you never know. It's moving wires around. Something might have shaken loose. Something might have, rubbed against something and created a short. So always test it once it's all buttoned back up. But I'm so pumped this works. The 12-volt distribution is a good kind of an investment mod, because now I have another 4 slots for another 4 accessories that just go right off that. And I don't ever have to worry about, doing that crazy tap in again. I already have that once there, so now I can just go ahead and add stuff as I need. And I really did need this USB charger and this adapter here, because on our last big trip, the one to Cape Breton along the Witches River, my USB charger failed on me and wouldn't charge batteries. So it was a really struggle. It was a real big struggle that trip to keep everything charged up. But I hope this inspires you to do something similar, or if you want to do exactly what I did, check out the description below. I've got the plans, the electrical schematics, the wiring diagram for this, and a parts list that you can kind of use to guide yourself into something similar. And I hope it works for you. And if you want to see the Silver Fox in action, definitely, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We have new videos on Monday, new motorcycle adventures, and I'd be happy to have you along on virtual rides together. Anyway, I am going to tidy up the shop, do a little bit more cleanup, and that's it for me.